Welcome to the Heal, Thrive, Dream podcast, where trauma survivors become healthy thrivers. Each month, we'll feature a theme in the trauma recovery and empowerment field. To promote your recovery, healing, and learning how to build dreams, here's your host, Karen Robinson, transformational coach and therapist.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Heal, Thrive, Dream. Today, we have a guest with us. Her name is Rachel Grant from Rachel Grant Coaching. Rachel has an MA in counseling psychology, and she also serves as a sexual abuse recovery coach. She is the author of Beyond Surviving, the Final Stage in Recovery from Sexual Abuse. Rachel offers a variety of programs and products, and she also offers a 28-day boot camp for the brain. So welcome, Rachel. What did I miss that you want to add to that?
Oh, it's like a good place to start, Karen. It's so nice to be here with you. Hello, everybody listening. Thanks for tuning in. And yeah, just looking forward to our conversation today.
Awesome. So I didn't forget anything big?
No, nothing big.
Okay.
That's where it's at. That's the short and sweet of it. I'm sure we'll get more into my story and kind of all of that as we go along. I'll fill in more of the pieces of the puzzle. But yeah, you know, you hit on it. I work as a sexual abuse recovery coach. I've been doing that since 2007, and in some ways, it's a title I just had to make up, Karen, because there really wasn't anyone out there that I could find anyway, doing what I wanted to do when it came to working with men and women who are really looking to break free from the pain of the past and abuse and move forward in their lives. And so and it's been quite a journey to develop that Beyond Surviving program and to find my way here today, doing this work.
Yeah. I did forget to mention that you do coaching groups as well as one-on-one. I think people like the choice. Yeah. So that's really cool.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's been a process of kind of building up all of the different, things that I would like to be able to offer to people. So everything from a free monthly kind of drop-in group that's donation-based, all the way up to my full, kind of one-on-one work and lots of things in between. I certainly know that in my process of healing and trying to figure things out, I had to access lots of resources, and sometimes I had means and sometimes I didn't. And so having access to a lot of different things has always been just really important to me, like building that out as a part of the way that I work and what I offer to the healing community. Yeah.
Awesome. So what about your story are you willing to share with the audience in hopes that it inspires them?
Sure. Yeah, well, I think every story has a beginning, and mine really goes back to Oklahoma. That's where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived at home with my mom and my dad. And when I was 5 years old, my grandfather came to live with our family. And Karen, I remember being really excited about this moment. Like, this is the day he's coming. I'm going to have, this new person, in my life. And
new adventure.
5 years old, I was like, oh, he's just like a little playmate, right? He's going to be my friend and we're going to play. We're going to hang out. And I just became very attached to him very quickly. And I would just race home from school and go straight to his room, and we would talk and play and hang out. And so I was very close to him. And then around the age of 10 is when he began sexually abusing me. So one day we're sitting out on the front porch like we always did. Oh my gosh, front porch swinging. Man, such a country thing, but I love it. And just watching everybody walk by and watching the people in the park across the street. Just a beautiful, warm Oklahoma day. And I've always been super cuddly and close. And so I was snuggled up with him and we were talking. But then I began to feel him touching my breast. And at 10, and at that moment, I just was like, I barely even understood my own body and how it was changing. And, it was still so very, very new, but I still had some sense of body awareness. I'm like, I don't think you're supposed to be touching me there. And thinking that he just didn't realize what he was doing. And so I, started to kind of wiggle to try to get away, but he gripped a hold of me. And so then, that moment of fear and panic sets in. I know so many of the stories that I hear from my clients, capture this moment where we go from like the moment before and the moment after. And not all of my clients have that experience because some of them, their trauma started very, very young, even in infancy. But for me, this was definitely a moment of before and after. And the abuse went on for some time, and it continued to escalate until one day my mom just happened to walk by and she saw him touching me. And she immediately responded to that in the way that we always hope people to do. She got him out of our home. My father and her both immediately moved him out of the house. They talked to me a little bit, and then they tried to get me into counseling. Oh my gosh. But I don't know if, your experience, Karen, or stories that you've maybe heard along the way, but for me in this moment as a 10-year-old, I didn't want to talk about this. I didn't want
Yeah.
to talk about what had happened. I was so confused myself. I barely had any words, let
Right.
alone sit in a room by myself with a man, by the way, a male counselor, by the way, and
Oh.
oh my gosh, it was torture. It was such torture. So I literally started running away and hiding in the woods so they couldn't find me and take me to the counselor. And so, mom and dad eventually said, all right, well, we're not going to get this stubborn redhead, to go. Maybe they should have pushed and fought a little bit harder. I don't know, but it is what it is. And I just kind of went into that beautiful space that we all live in for a while of pretend. I'm fine. Everything's okay. Nothing to see here, right? And that was, even though, I struggled in my teens, gosh, just, under the weight of the trauma and the impact. And so if I jump forward in my story a little bit, I got married, and I was in a relationship for 10 years. 3 of that was married, and the relationship wasn't very healthy, but a couple of things came out of that, which one of them was I began to face the fact that this childhood trauma had really impacted me, and I needed to face it. I needed to do something about it. And so I did start, doing some counseling and getting a more of an understanding of what was going on for me. But when I divorced, it was a real turning point for me. I just felt so very strongly that something had to change, and it had to change pretty quick, or I was going to live out the rest of my life just feeling pretty miserable and just surviving. And that's really the moment in my life when I became very committed to answering this question of how do we actually heal from sexual trauma. So I started reading everything I could. I eventually did my master's in counseling psychology and studied neuroscience. And it was really through those efforts, along with, mentor coaches of mine, that I began to think about healing trauma through a different lens and approaching it from a perspective of there comes a time where understanding trauma is no longer healing, and talking about trauma is no longer healing, but instead there has to be some action, there has to be some shift. And so that's really what I started doing just in my own life, kind of using myself as a guinea pig, trying to address all of the ways in which I felt broken, I felt unavailable to life, unavailable to others, and just started trying things to see, like, does this work? Does that work? And then, some women in the early days were very kindly my guinea pigs. Once I felt like I kind of had something, I thought, well, I wonder if this will help other people too, or is it, unique to me in some way? But so I started testing that out in, 2007 and 8 really. And the program has continued to evolve over all these years, but today, the Beyond Surviving program really is, a step-by-step process. It's a lifestyle. It's a process of using skills and tools to help us feel complete about the past, but also to be really equipped with life going forward, right? Because life doesn't stop happening. But so can we get out of a place where we're just always in recovery? And I'll just say one more thing and then I'll pause because I know I'm just
Yeah.
going and going. I guess I just, when I think about life as it is today, Karen, boy, if you had told my teenage self, even my 20-something self, even my early 30-something self that like this is what life could be and could feel like, I would have laughed out loud at it because it seems so unobtainable to imagine a time when I could just wake up in the day not full of dread, when I could have really healthy, loving relationships and really just feeling good and comfortable in my own skin without that kind of constant voice that's just like always at you and taking you down. And God, like the silence is rather satisfying at the
Yeah.
end of the
Yeah.
day. So I'll leave it there for now. And yeah, I'm sure there'll be more to say, but that's a little bit of my journey and how I found myself here today with you.
Well, I find that very inspiring because so many survivors, as you know, get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
I have one
Yeah.
client right now who has tried therapy a million times before working with me, and she brings up quitting every other week, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell her, this is your therapy, so you are able, you are actually able to make that decision at any time. However, let's remember that you have not truly healed at this point, and so if you break off again, it might mean things aren't better and you might have to come back. Not
Right.
not to me, but to someone else.
Yeah.
Or me. So but it's always your choice. And then she always says, like, I need to stick with it. It's been too long. I've suffered way too long for this.
Yeah.
But she doesn't she has such a hard time describing her symptoms, like what's like a real symptom of the trauma versus
Mm.
am I exaggerating? Am I making this up because of like the messages she got from the abusers?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
oh, you're making that up, or you're exaggerating, or that didn't happen. So even though she's 50 something year old adult female, she's still questioning that. And then, but still knows that she feels bad and worries that she won't recover, you know?
Yeah.
And just a short amount of time of therapy, she's like real therapy where we're not just shooting the shit. We're talking about action, right? We're talking
Fair.
about what needs to happen to
Mm-hmm.
heal, like a real, true healing. And the first part for her was education because she didn't realize some of the things that happened were abuse. Like
Right.
one of the things that happened in her family is um, some people in her family had a sex trafficking ring,
Mm.
and she was exposed to that. I'm like, that's part of being abused.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah.
Like they didn't sell me, they sold other
Oh,
people. Well, the fact that you were being abused and were aware of that, that's pretty scary for a young child at 7 to
yeah.
know about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's for me one of the things that made the biggest difference is as I started to really get my head wrapped around what literally had happened in my head and to my nervous system as a result of abuse and trauma, having some context, having some language. I think that's really one of my favorite things that I do with my clients is teaching them about the neuroscience of trauma
Yeah.
because so much of that begins to break down this idea that we're just like somehow broken or messed up when we really start to understand that abuse is an injury, it causes an injury. And so all types of injury of confidence, injury of, sense of self, injury to our ability to trust, our ability to make choices, to believe in our own worth and our own value. The good news, all of those injuries can be repaired and healed. Yeah.
My
So
goodness.
sometimes getting some context for what you've experienced, being able to put some things into some categories and getting some good information, just being trauma informed alongside getting those, skills and tools and strategies that we all need to do in order to do the repair work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just so fascinating to me, like how much trauma truly impacts every area of a survivor's life, and then even when you think you know most of the things about trauma, we're learning new things still every day. But
Totally.
the
Yeah.
good part is we're also learning how incredibly flexible our brain is to the healing and to possibilities and making new connections again.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's encouraging.
Yeah, and and then I feel for your client. I certainly hear it, from the men and women that I work with as well, at times like, oh, this is heavy, it's work. It feels really unfair that I'm here, doing all this heavy lifting of getting myself sorted, following on the choices and because of the choices that somebody made to cause harm. And they're right about it. It is unfair.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
at the end of the day, our life is all we really can be at choice about. And so at some point in my work, I really began to understand that by continuing to suffer, I was losing my life to something that had happened in that moment. It was like 16 years earlier. And that stopped making sense to me.
Yeah.
It really just became crystal clear to me that this was at some point, I'm going to say something that, might be a little jarring, but at some point for me personally, I realized, look, this trauma isn't happening to me anymore. And what is happening to me is it's like the echoes of that trauma, right? The impact of that trauma. But at some point, my grandfather is no longer the problem. At some point, I'm the problem. And I've got to get into a state of empowerment and ownership of myself and awareness about myself so that I can make the choices that I need to make so that I can live the life that I really want to live. Because I just got to a place where it no longer felt okay to lose another day
Mm.
to the things that had happened to me in the past. And was that a light switch moment? Then all of a sudden, no. But it was a point of decision. And
Right.
that's really what everyone comes into in this healing journey. It's like getting to a point of decision. And then it's the work and getting the right mentor and, finding the person and finding the modalities that work for you. Because the beautiful thing about healing trauma is there are 100 ways to do it
Oh, yes.
and more. That's the good news. Like I offer a way towards healing, and for the people who come to me and it resonates with, like, it works. Just like for somebody else who wants, who works really strongly through the body, their clients, right? And then sometimes we, of course, like to dabble in all of the things and get a
Mhm.
nice round toolkit. So we have little skills from lots of different modalities. But I guess bottom line, what I'm just was feeling called to offer there is just this for anyone listening who you find yourself in any of those places of hopelessness. It's understandable, and keep coming back to, like, this is my life. I get to live it, and
Mhm.
I am in charge about that. Like, that's an empowering thought to recognize that you didn't have any choice about the things that happened to you, but you do have so much choice about how you heal and moving forward and reclaiming your life. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
You said something important about it didn't happen in a moment where you decided my life means something and I need to not have another day of this craziness. I
Hmm.
need to heal. Do you remember one or two or even three resources at that point that you were involved in that helped with that shift?
Mm,
Or is it too
yeah.
broad?
No, I mean, I can definitely remember some very particular things. I was in a kind of a community building workshop, and we were being asked to think about, something that we would want to put out into the community. And I, at that time, was thinking I wanted to do a panel, bring together a panel of people to talk about healing sexual trauma. And I was going back and forth. I couldn't figure out a name for it. And ultimately, I was having a conversation with one of the guys in the workshop, and I was telling him a little bit about my story, and he responds by saying, well, I don't really know what to call your, panel, but God, it's just really so amazing, like how you've survived and how you've made it through so much. And Karen, in that moment, I got so angry. Oh, I'm so sick of people telling me I'm a survivor. I'm so, like, I just got upset about that. And I was like, I don't want to survive my life.
The
I want
word
to
is a little
live it.
triggering. Yeah.
Right. And like, there must be something beyond surviving. And he starts laughing at me, and he says, well, I don't know. about any of that, but I know you have a name for whatever it is you're going to do beyond surviving. And so that wasn't a book or a resource, but it was an experience. It was an experience that locked it in for me, that said, this is what I am fighting for. This is the mission. Now, backing that up, things like Dan Siegel's book, The Developing Mind, and even his other book, which I'm reading more right now, Mind Sight. Dan Siegel's work was really, really important for me at that time. Really getting into again, that neuroscience of trauma piece, it really just changed the whole thing for me. It was a point of clarity. It was a point of, aha, okay, I'm a very pragmatic thinker.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I've started to put these pieces together and see like, oh no, this is just like a jigsaw puzzle. Like this piece got, offline because of trauma, and it's doing this wiggly thing over here, which we don't want it to do. So how do I make that not wiggle? Right? And how do I get this other piece like to come click into place with that? And if those two things come together, then I'll be okay, like I'll settle down. So like for me, like I had a lot of emotional dysregulation. Like I could fly off the handle like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And very quickly triggered, very quickly into kind of rage, anger, upset. And I had to learn, like I had to literally teach my system. I had some foundations in many ways because my, the trauma really didn't start. I mean, it might have started earlier, but my most distinct memory is at 10. So that's usually where I mark it. So I have some good years, right, of child development and safety to draw upon, which not all my clients have. And that's okay. They still get to learn and be fine. But ultimately, I started to notice things like, man, I am responding to this like I am a 10-year-old. Like I have the emotional capacity of a 10-year-old. And I have to learn the skills and tools that it takes in order to maintain a sense of grounded, a sense of, and it's not like I'm perfect, y'all, for you. Please.
Right.
Okay.
People have a bad day sometimes.
I always tell my clients it's more often than not. That's all we're going for here. There's no such thing as perfect. There's no such thing as like, oh, I'm totally 100% healed and never have a bad day. Like that doesn't exist. But more often than not, am I self-resourced? Am I grounded? Am I present? Am I at ease? Am I calm? Am I not throwing Tupperware anymore? Right? All the things you do when you're in the midst of
You're
your
such a
trauma.
beast.
Oh my gosh, some stories I could tell you. So that's the idea, right? And so that book was so helpful because it started to help me to understand that there are approaches and there are solutions. And I'm sure a million of other things because I just love to read. So,
Yeah.
books, whether fiction, nonfiction, are always just a resource to me in kind of navigating this wild thing called life. Yeah.
I got excited when you mentioned Dan Siegel or Siegel, because he was helpful for me in my own journey.
Mm,
The book that made a difference for me was called Parenting from the Inside Out.
nice. I haven't read that one. Wow.
It is really, really powerful. And I think it's even powerful for people, whether or not they decide to have children or not. At the time that I read it, my oldest daughter was an infant. So it wasn't really about, I wasn't at that point worried if I was going to be like a good enough mother. But when I was in therapy, just telling the therapist some of my story, she recommended the book, and it comes with these journaling exercises within it, every chapter.
Nice.
And so I would just write, and it was powerfully healing, and it explained how like that younger child can be triggered so easily, like the biochemistry around that and getting stuck at those ages. So it was a really powerful book. I will never forget that therapist for that. It's like, it was just such a powerful, and let's talk about giving back. Like I've told like thousands of clients at this point about this book, and now I'm telling you,
Yeah.
check it out, right?
Totally.
It's such a powerful book. Yeah. Books, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, I often say to my clients, it's really just about finding the tool for the job.
Yeah.
And sometimes we hunt around and oh, maybe this is the tool. Okay, no, not quite. Like that took me this far, but not far enough. Okay, now I need this tool, or I need a combination of tools. And so also maintaining that mentality and kind of that mindset when it comes to healing, that if it's taking time, it's taking time. Like there isn't anything bad or wrong about that,
Mhm.
because all of it is in purpose and in service to you getting closer and closer to the things that are going to, really unlock and open things up for you. I really believe that. And that we find that mentor, that guide, or that modality or that approach that just ultimately just so resonates with us that we can't really turn back. Right? And we step and we find that, oh, I'm on a new path now. I'm heading in a different direction. And we continue to self-resource. I mean, I think one of the things that's always important to think about, for at least for me and in the context of the work that I do, is, I don't think we're meant to spend our life in recovery. I don't think we're meant to be spending all the rest of our lives like kind of rehashing, looking back at the things that have happened. But I think having mentorship and having guidance and along, in as we navigate life is helpful and important. And that can be in a book, that can be in a movie, that can be in
Mhm.
a friend, that can be in, so many things, a sunrise, right? Like if you want to get really woo about it.
Yeah, I do. Sometimes the woo-woo works.
Yes, right? Yeah, and so persevere, because sometimes, like, I know for me, sometimes it's been like just right around the corner. Like I was just about to give up, and then I found that book that took me to the next level, right?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that was the piece that I needed at this moment in my life. And oh, here's the next piece, and here's the next piece. And just try not to get frustrated if you're in the stage of you're collecting your pieces, right? And figuring out what works for you, because sometimes it is trial and error. To
Yeah,
get there.
I agree. Yeah, I think everybody's journey is different.
Mm.
And that's why it's so important to try different resources and not, you know, for therapists not to be stuck in one particular model, but to
Yeah,
have a few tools because everybody's different.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So my next thing I'm wondering about is what are you currently reading? And if you're reading a book for work, what is something fun you're reading as well?
Oh my goodness. So what's so funny about me is I'm an English major by heart. So this is what I did in undergrad. And I thought I was going to be a high school English teacher. And then life became wiggly, as it does. I hung out with some teenagers and realized, no, thank you. But I read all the time, but I can never remember the names of books. And so I have to actually go and pull up the book. Right now, I'm reading the first book in a series by Emily King called Before the Broken Star. And I love this book because it's very fanciful and creative. And there are, pixies and fairies and gnomes and a girl with a clock heart. And it's all about time and time standing still and love and all these things. And so it's very fantastical. So that's my like kind of for fun book that I'm reading. And then I'm kind of reading, I'm making my way through Mind Sight by Dan Siegel. And then I'm going to forget the author, but Trauma Stewardship is another book that I'm kind of, I pick up. I'm usually reading like 4 books at a time. So that one's in progress as well as Glennon Doyle's Untamed.
Hmm.
So good. All of her work is so
It's
good.
so good. Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
like Brene Brown too?
of course. How can you not?
Yeah.
Like little peas in a
What was
pod there
the
too.
name of the trauma book again? Trauma.
Oh, Trauma Stewardship.
Okay. I've
Yeah,
heard
thrilling
of
through the
that
fringes as
title.
somebody, yeah, who's I mean, and this is not just for therapists. We're all out in the world holding trauma for other
Mhm.
people. I mean, look at the world right now. We're witnessing trauma in our communities and in our circles. We're having conversations about this. We're absorbing the pain of other people. And, um, yeah. And so this book is really just all about how do we hold space for the hurt of other people without becoming pessimistic or re-traumatized, right? Secondary trauma, these sorts of things. Um, and certainly, in my work, I've had to develop a lot of capacity for that to, hold other stories of other people. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. I mean, it's the most amazing thing when you see people who have been told to be quiet, to shut up, don't speak, outright threatened,
Mhm.
to say anything, and they come to session and you can see they're shaking and they're unsure and oh my gosh, and everything in their nervous system is yelling, please don't do this.
Yeah.
But they do it anyway, right? And they're bold and they're brave and
Get their
uh,
voice.
yeah, yeah. And, one of the things that in my work, that doesn't happen until session 10 out of 16. It's way into the work because what I've just people telling their stories is important, but also making sure that you have some foundations before you do that. It was one of my pet peeves about therapy, really,
Yeah.
quite honestly, is walking in the door and, okay, tell me everything. I have to do an intake, a very official intake, you
Yeah.
know? Great. No, like I'm supposed to write it. I never really liked that. It never sat well with me. And so I just did it differently
Yeah.
when I set things up for
That's
the
the
outside.
beauty of having your own business, right?
Yes.
Yeah. The way I handle the intake is I'm going to ask you some questions. You can choose to not answer some of them now because I know you just met me. I'm a
Yeah,
stranger. It's okay.
right.
I'm happy to address
Great.
those later.
Yeah, yeah, what a thing. But anywho, so yeah, this healing thing. But there's such good news in it, and there is so much light and hope. And at the end of the day, the more people who I think stand in their empowered self and really step up to what is happening in their lives right now, I think the thing that gets me the most upset about trauma is just the way that it steals time. It's at the time when we're experiencing it, and then through our years. So think what we can do when we have all that time back, when we're not consumed with suffering. But we have our energy and our vitality, and we get to be out in the world using our gifts, using our talents, loving, connecting. I think that's something to aspire to, and the more people we can get on that page, the better off we're all going to be.
Oh, that's a beautiful note. I'd love to end on that note, if
Mm,
it's okay.
sure. Thanks, Karen.
Okay. So thanks for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure meeting you and hearing um, your story. Even though it was a tough story, you overcame and made a beautiful ending
Mm.
for yourself, or a new beginning is probably a better way to say it.
Thank you for listening in today. Please join us next week, same day and time. Also, I would love for you to check out my website, healthrivedream.com.